Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and today, are you ready to ignite your business? That's what we're going to be talking about. That's super important, and I love talking about website design, especially with all these copy and paste AI websites, how that landscape is changing. There's a lot going on right now, and I get personally frustrated for two reasons. One is if you pitch to me via email to be on my podcast and you don't include a website link or you don't have a website, that's both reasons in one. If you should have a website, let's just put it down. Even if you're just an artist, having an online portfolio is crucial to get picked up on the internet to have those. It's your walking business card. It's your living business card. So we're going to ignite our businesses today with website design, among a lot of other things. Today's guest, I don't remember how or when I met her. I just remember walking out onto a balcony on a cruise ship and seeing her trying to suntan, and then I obnoxiously yell, "Hey, everyone!" And I just disrupted the peace. And that's my earliest memory of today's guest, Ms. Lori Lyons. Met her on the Podcasters Cruise, now called the New Media Cruise, and that was 2 years ago and 3, 4 months. So it's been a while, and we are now only podcasting for the first time because I don't really follow up on real life connections because I take the online connections, and the people in real life always say, "I'll see you soon." And because time goes by like that, we're already in February, and I feel like I just, celebrated New Year's. So, Ms. Lyons, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And could you please tell
Um,
us a little bit about yourself?
sure, sure. And I'm gonna add two addendums to that. The first is that it's taken a while because I've canceled you like 17 times because I couldn't talk. And finally you were like, "You really want to do this?" I'm like, "I really want to do this. I can't talk." But the second thing is it wasn't just you yelled at me from the balcony. You were like directly above me. And on the cruise ship there was no ceiling above us. And it wasn't until you yelled and I turned around and looked that I saw all the people above us because you're like
Right.
right out in the
You had a
open.
top on, thank goodness.
I did. Thank goodness. Yes, it was like, well, no, pajamas on the balcony
Right.
with
That's
this shit. But
I was gonna go out there to record content, and I looked up and there was all these non-content people who were giving me this judgmental look like, what is this guy doing? He's got a tripod, he's one of those influencers, and
yes,
so it's hard to find a quiet spot to record sometimes, that's for sure.
it is. That's the truth. That's the truth. All right. So a little bit about me. The condensed version is former teacher, went, turned corporate, turned small business owner, started my own business before entrepreneur was really a mainstream word, and just weird people work from home. So, and that was in the mid 90s. And the business that I had, I sold marketing packaging to Fortune 500 companies. So that was binders and that was folders and that was the custom stuff. And this thing called the internet came along, and nobody really wanted binders and folders because everything was going online.
Right.
And it wasn't going anywhere. That wasn't this fad that was going to go away. So at that point in time, I kind of came to a crossroad and said, I either need to close my business or I need to shift it totally. And I just didn't want to shift it. I was like tired of doing it. It's one of those crossroads in your life where you're like, now's the time to do something different. So I did economy, the housing economy bottomed out in 2007. So that really limited a lot of things. But
Right.
in 2010, I started working for a digital marketing company. And I knew, when I tell you I knew nothing, I knew nothing. I mean, I could turn my computer on and I could play, I was computer
Right.
literate, but I wasn't savvy. And part of my job as an account manager was walking people through setting up their email and all this kind of stuff. So there was a big learning curve, but not only was I account manager, but I started teaching myself WordPress because we were a WordPress shop. And
Mm,
it was kind of like I said, all right, if a client needed something, if I put it through the system, it could take, 3 or 4 days to a week to get something done when it could be very simple. So I learned how to do simple things so that I could take care of clients on the spot. And that just led one thing to another. And fast forward a couple of years, and I was laid off because the direction of the company moved and they wanted somebody who was technical. And if you're on the
Mm.
podcast, I've got the air quotes because you can't see, but he wanted more technical.
Right.
What he didn't realize was I was becoming technical as over the course of the several years, and I knew a whole lot more when I started. And so when I was laid off, I had, I don't know, it's not too much time passed, and I had a high school friend call me and he said, "Hey, I hear you're working for a design company. I need a new website." And I said, "Well, I was laid off, but I'd be happy to build you one." It was one of those things that came out of nowhere and you think, What did I just do?"
Right.
But I said, in full transparency, I've never done one start to finish, but if you're willing, I'll do it for you. And he said, that's fine. And I said, I don't know how long it'll take me. He said, I've had this one for 13 years. I think I can wait a couple of months. So I'm
Right.
fine with that. And I did it and he paid me. And he was a client up until, I don't know, about 6 months ago and sold his business and retired. So, it became the start of a beautiful friendship. And that's kind of how I got started. And I was like, this is fun. It took all the background that I had, all of the training that I had, and really pulled out the marketing aspect of it. And that's one thing that I really enjoyed. So that's kind of where we came full circle up until about, I don't know, about a year ago. And I started realizing that while I enjoy doing it and I will always promote the value of websites and talk about what you need, I also found that I really excelled in the messaging part of it. So I've been also doing a lot of business coaching with my clients, and that is really fun too. So it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
And you're also a podcaster, which we'll get into
Yes.
later
Yes.
on. So you kind of shared with us how you ignited your business there, so to speak.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the air quotes on the technical. Do you feel like maybe I'm reading into it too much? Do you feel like you were discriminated based on your age?
No, because he was older than I was. I I've had that thought. I don't think so. I think I was in this case truly it was because of the direction he wanted to go, and he had not kept up with what I was doing. So
Mm.
his loss, not mine. And it really gave me the courage to say, let me go do something that I really enjoyed. So no, a good question, but I don't think so. I think it was more of, we were a small business and you just didn't know what I was doing. Hold my beer,
Okay.
I'll show you. You know?
Right, because I've seen a lot of, when it comes to technology, assuming that because of people's ages that they don't
Right,
know how to use technology as efficiently or whatever it may be. And I've
right,
also seen just with women as well, especially like I know when my mom was a stay-at-home mom for quite a while, and then when she tried to go back into the working world, it was
yeah,
like, well, now you're this age and you've been out of work for this amount of time, like there's no value there,
yeah,
or like your skills are expired, so to speak. So I've seen a lot of,
right,
workplace stuff for that. Or on the opposite end, oh, you're so young, what could you know about this or that, even if your resume experience says
sure.
XYZ. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah, and I think you have to define technology. In this particular case, we were
Right.
looking at website building and development and all the coding, which I still don't. I mean, you don't want me to code your website. You don't, that's not my strong point. So, I mean, if you look at technology, what drives me crazy is the people who say, "Oh, well, I'm old, I can't work Google Drive." And I have clients that do
Mm.
that. It's like, hello, if you have a business, you gotta have something. And we were talking about, I was down at Podfest not too long ago, and one of the comments from the stage was the boomer that can't operate AI I'm like,
Mm.
hello, wait a minute. I'm actually officially Generation Jones, I have but I'm far more technical than a lot of the young people sitting there. So it really is a matter of definition, I think, and the stereotypes that we apply to that. And some of them are self-fulfilling prophecy because
100%.
there are people my age who will tell you, I'm old, I can't do it. No,
It's really a cop out and
it
excuse,
really
right?
is.
It's a
Yep.
justification to not have to do something. And I think
Yep.
one of the issues, one of the mindsets that I don't approve of is a lot of people who are in that position will say, well, I can just pay someone to do it for me. I can outsource, outsource,
Yep.
outsource. And I know people who say outsource everything. I won't name names, but I've met people who say that. And I think how it should be is outsource after you've learned. Like just like how AI, you should
Absolutely.
be able to do everything, not everything, but most stuff on your own before you have AI do it. Like you look at my generation, AI came afterward, right? So I did all the essay writing myself. Now you've got people, AI is writing the essay for them. They can't do it without it. I could do it without it. Now, could
Right.
I use AI to help me write an essay? I wouldn't because I'm a, published writer. I'm not going to do that. But in general,
Yeah.
it's like tools should be used to help you make something more efficient or done more easily, but you should be able to do it yourself. And I think the same thing with outsourcing. I think everyone who's hiring a virtual assistant to their social media clips, you should be able to do it on your own in case
Yeah.
anything happens. Especially, you look at anything could happen, a death in the family, a monsoon, it could be anything. So you should be able to set up the Zoom calls, answer the emails, and then outsource it. And that's
Yeah.
just my personal opinion because I think self-reliance is one of the things that makes you a powerful business owner and entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And not only that, but from a process standpoint, if you don't know what your process is, how are you ever going to pass it on? Because,
Mm,
today's workplace, you never know how long somebody's going to be there. You hope they're going to be around a while if you invest the time and the money into training somebody. But, if those processes don't make sense or if you can't figure them out, then you're kind of right back where you started. Totally agree with that.
100%.
Totally agree.
Especially if you get a new assistant and they're like, so what was the process? And you're like, I don't know. My old assistant just took care of everything. It's like, well,
Right.
I can't take care of what I don't know. And
It's
then
your
have
business.
fun reaching them. They're gone. They're not being
Yeah.
paid. They're not answering.
Right.
You
Well, and
know,
it brought, when you said, for to use AI for ease, in my generation, I sound like I'm a doddering old lady, but I remember when microwaves came out. And, oh, heaven forbid, microwaves. Now it's,
right.
they're commonplace, but we weren't using microwaves to totally cook our own dinner. We still had to do all the stuff. It just shortened things and made it easier. And I think that's what for AI for a lot of people is doing. And I'm thinking more of the, just the generic, not the real heavy duty process AI stuff, but
Right.
just where most business owners are using AI, I use it all the time. I have so many ideas and so much things boils around in this ADHD brain that I have a hard time putting it into organization in a way that makes sense. And that's what I use it for, is I use it to help me categorize and ideate and expand. And then I go back in and I really put my, like, okay, let's add this, let's do this, great. This gave me an outline and a foundation. Now I go in and flesh it out and fill it out. And then I fine tune with it. So, and it's made me so much better of a business person and a coach and a website person because I'm able to do that.
And I think what I've seen is, especially with my father, is a great case example. He resisted technology his whole life because he said it's evil. I don't want the change. I'm going to refuse to learn it. And it's become a part of daily life. You kind of
Yeah.
can't escape it unless you go out to Amish country,
Right.
but it's like it's very hard not to. So now my
Does he have
dad
a
can't do
phone?
anything. He does, but I have to help him operate all the time. He can't even clear voicemails out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I found, he wanted to post something on Facebook, and I only use it for business purposes. So I was like, I'm not the expert, but I can help you out. And teaching him how to post a photo on there. It was maybe he had to send it from his phone to his laptop, so it was extra steps, but it was only 4 or 5 steps. And to him, it was like the world ending. And I
Yeah.
say that to say a lot of people overcomplicate through
They do.
irrational fear of what technology is because they had this mindset of technology is so complicated, I can't learn it. And like you talking about using a Google Drive or even using AI, it's like it can be as simple as you type in a question, just like a search engine.
Yeah.
But when you say you had to ask the AI versus type it into Google, people suddenly have this drastic shift of what that looks like. It's like
Right. Right.
picturing in their head, they're like making up fictional scenarios that overcomplicate it. And
Oh yeah.
sending an email when sending an email seems so complicated, you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And when you think it's overcomplicated, then even learning, you're kind of like biasing everything. And we do that with all kinds of stuff in life in general,
Oh
but
yeah.
especially with technology. And I just want to shift into, you talked about moving more into the marketing direction.
Uh-huh.
What exactly does that mean for you and look like for you, especially in this time period where the marketing landscape is changing so much with social media, with AI, with influence, with a lot of stuff that you didn't have when you were going through your business life.
Yeah, for me, I really find that my sweet spot is in messaging. And
Mm,
I find that a lot of business owners, they either way overcomplicate it or they don't speak the language that their clients speak. They're speaking their language, which doesn't
mm,
always translate. And I'll give you, for example, I have a client, or I'll give you a better example. I was at a an event several years ago, and there was a woman there who said she was in marketing. And I thought, all right, I'm going to go connect with her because I always like, it's always fun to pass things back and forth and commiserate if you need to. And so I went up and introduced myself and I said, what do you do? She said, I help heart centered women that are lost within their souls and yada, 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 that, blah, blah. And my eyes were crossing and I'm like, all right, so what does that mean? And she proceeded to give me a totally revised version of that, very woo woo language. And I speak woo woo. So I knew what she was saying, but I had no idea what she was doing with it. And so it took her 3 times. Finally, I said, I'm sorry. I really don't know what you do. She said, I own a website design agency.
very
Now, if
simple.
you're on the podcast, you didn't see my face, but it was like, really? Yeah, and she was totally speaking a language that in today's world, people would turn her off. People would, next because they don't know exactly. They don't want to have to take the time to
Mm,
figure out what you do. They want it clear and simple. And this is how I help. This is how I serve. This is what I do. And this is how I can
mm.
help you.
And people's attention spans are declining so rapidly. You look at the statistics. I mean, I was confronted that my YouTube short videos were too long at 30 seconds. I need to be down to 10 to 12
Yeah.
seconds. And I'm like, I just can't fit a piece of comedy or education into 12 seconds like that. It's just not possible from a long form conversation. Like, thank goodness social media added a 2 times speed button. I think that has saved a lot of long form content and
Yeah.
myself included, and now you can
Well,
go up to 4 times speed. Whew.
yeah. And here's the interesting thing about that is, yes, we've all heard that, we have the attention less than a goldfish of 7 seconds, blah, blah, blah. But the interesting thing is if you have a good hook and people are listening, they will listen. And it
Oh yeah.
doesn't matter if it's 10 seconds, 20 minutes, or an hour. Look at Joe Rogan. They will listen if they are interested in your topic and you draw them in. So the way to do that is by keeping it simple and telling exactly what you're going to do with words that they understand. I use the example also of I was in a weekly networking marketing group, in a weekly group that networking. And there was a chiropractor in there for years, and he kept talking about and I can't say it, but subluxation of the spine. And I'd be like, what is subluxation of the spine? And I went to another networking group, and the chiropractor there, she's like, your back hurt? I can fix it. That's subluxation. I still can't say it.
Right,
So,
right,
but if your back is wonky, I can fix your back. And I'm like, hello, who do you think I went to? I
right.
went to her because I understood what she did. Now I knew what a chiropractor does. I know that they fix
Yeah.
backs, but tell me that. Don't make me try to figure it out. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of business owners are making today is they're trying to be too cute and fancy and, all the clever words and stuff.
I've I've done a bit of so I don't get paid for it, but I've done a bit of, devil's advocate work when it comes to people's professional type. One of the big things is a lot of people in this creative industry that we're in, podcasting space and stuff, make up their own titles. And sometimes they are straightforward and sometimes they are very abstract. So I've done a lot of work of asking them, and I was talking to some individuals like, tell me what you do. And it's like, okay, now how can you reword that? Because, sometimes people just struggle with
Right.
articulation, and
Yeah.
it's oh, too many words, too few words, or trying to put in these fancy keywords to catch attention and they just
Yeah.
detract from what it is. So I think it's so important, like you said, the messaging. And yeah, I've come across some interesting titles that people have made up for themselves. And
Yeah.
I've kind of gotten, me personally, I'm kind of over so many people are adding the word architect or builder or all these different terms to their title. And so I decided to have fun with it, and people were asking me about past jobs. And I used to work at this taco restaurant. Like we only serve tacos, but I would tell people I was a Spanish cuisine preparation artist. Like that to give an
That's great.
example of like
Yeah.
how some of these titles work. Like I think I bumped into someone who they were a landscaper, but they said I am a what was it? It was like I am a lawn beautician and designer, like
Hey,
stuff like that. But sometimes it works. It's just
Right, right.
you talk about, would you say the biggest mistakes like overcomplication or undersimplification? Like what are some of the biggest messaging mistakes you're seeing?
One of the biggest messenger mistakes is not being clear who you work with. And
Mm,
we hear all the time about ideal client, ideal client. And all of us marketers preach ideal client, ideal client. But one thing that they don't talk about is a someone is an ideal client if they're ready, if they're willing, and they're able to work with you. And ready can mean a lot of things, willing can mean a lot of things, but able means they can pay you. And a lot of times we forget that as business owners and coaches because we want business, we want that person to come work with us, but they have to be able to pay you. And I think that's one of the mistakes that a lot of business owners make is they're not real clear to themselves who they want to work with because they got to work with everybody. We've all heard that.
right.
And I'm not one of those who will sit here and say, you've got to decide that you're going to work with women at 55 that do this, that do this, that do that, and that's all I'm going to work with because that's simply like poor business. Because you when you decide that you want that's who your marketing message is going to. That might be who you talk to. But myself with my website design agency, I can look at my client list and I have all kinds of clients. But the one thing that they had in common was they needed help with their messaging. And that's one thing that I'm very good. So my ideal client, air quotes again, my ideal client was someone who didn't understand what they did in their messaging and they needed a clear way to present it to the paying public, whatever that looks like. So that was my ideal client, not the 55-year-old women who blah, 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 blah. So
Mm,
I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of business owners make is they try to put a square, a square into a round hole and make it fit. But ready,
mm.
willing, and able is a pretty simple way to define it.
Right. I think of like I'll share an example without even name drop so y'all can check out her website. But Casey McDonald, she was on the new media cruise with us. She's a coworker of mine, and I was looking at her new website design and stuff and talking to her about what she does. She's a transcendent wealth architect, and her logo was a lion and teal colors and stuff. And she said, I work specifically with female faith-based business owners looking to break into the seven-figure category. And I said, why don't you try swapping the lion with a lioness, right? Because you are a faith-based female business owner trying to help female faith-based business owners. I said the lion symbol that you have is very similar to all the testosterone boost companies, to the men masculinity mindset stuff that I've seen.
Good
And
point.
looking at your website design and your logo initially, I definitely thought it was, a very masculine thing. So try the lioness approach. So I think a lot of subtle things for you talking about like ideal clients is like the line is cool. It looks cool to everyone, but it gives a more masculine vibe. So even stuff like that, I've noticed, So
Oh
I
yeah.
think it's really important when you talk about, especially if you're very specifically one gender or the other. So I think that's
Sure.
important too. And like when you do
Yeah.
messaging, do you help companies with their physical branding as well in terms of colors, logos, and stuff like that? Or you focus mainly on the message itself?
Yeah, I do to a certain extent. It depends on where they come in. And when I first started out, a lot of my clients were new business owners and didn't have that. So I don't propose to be a full scale branding company, but I can do it. We do it on a level enough that makes sense for their website that they don't have to go and redo it.
Mm.
But so much of it involves around the messaging. And excuse me, a lot of times I just say, pick colors that work for you. I mean, we can spend weeks and months and doctorates on color psychology.
Oh yeah.
Is it really going to matter for that business coach or that coach who wants to work with this audience? Probably not. They're not going to go, oh, their logo is red. That's high energy. That's going to turn me off. Although I do love the analogy of the lion and the lioness. I think that is brilliant. So very good job there. So I mean, it's simple things like that that
Thank
can
you. I
tweak.
did it for free. I work for free.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you
Gotta
go.
start
I'll hire
charging
you.
people.
But yeah, but I think there's
Yeah.
a big part of that that we overthink and overcomplicate. And websites can be the same way. A website should authenticate you. It should tell what you do, who you serve. And when I talk to clients about who they serve and the problems that they solve, it's not just the problems, it's the symptoms of the problems. That's where the money is.
Mm,
Because, I had a client come to me and he said, I work with clients that have imposter syndrome. And I said, all right, do they come to you and say, I have imposter syndrome? He's like, well, no. But that's what his marketing said. I work with, if you have imposter syndrome, I can help you, a lot of different ways. But I said, what are the symptoms of imposter syndrome? He said, well, they procrastinate. They're not comfortable with the message. They change things around over and over again because they're worried they're not getting it right. They're perfectionists. There was a list of about 6 or 7 things. And I said, if you talk about that, are you procrastinating because you're not sure of the direction that you're going to go? That I can say, oh, that's me. But if you say, do you have imposter syndrome? I'm like, oh, I don't have imposter syndrome. Although we all say
right.
we do, that's going to be something I'm like, no, that's
Right.
that's not what I have, you know. So show me what the symptoms are, and that's where the gold lies for a lot of businesses is look at the symptoms, not just the problems, and address those.
I agree 100%, because a lot of us are in denial or don't even know that there's a title associated with what we're doing, and I
Right.
think a lot of people are tired of hearing the word burnout. So it would be like, what are you experiencing that could be because of burnout and how to alleviate those. So I think those are two great examples right there. And I think
Okay.
I
There's
want
another whole podcast episode we could have about words that I think should be banished in 2026.
right, right. There's a lot of I've heard a lot of words really overused
Yes.
or changed so much in the
Yes.
landscape recently. And unfortunately, like AI puts out a lot of words over and over again. Like if it says we're gonna dive into, I know it's AI. No one dives
Yeah.
into stuff anymore,
Yeah.
but it's like,
I know.
yeah, it's the
Yeah.
the words, and that's actually
Clarity. Yeah.
kind of going right. That's kind of going into what I want to ask you next, which is I'm giving a talk on website design in July,
Uh-huh.
unless it gets rescheduled or whatever. But one of the things I talked about, which is just this is my opinion, I'm be curious of yours, is I'm like because of the way AI has shifted, everyone can now have SEO optimized, search engine optimization.
Yeah.
It goes back to what you do, which is the message and the branding is more important than the technical side because now basically what I said is when everyone's SEO optimized, no one is, right?
Right.
If we
Right.
all have full search engine optimization through AI, and all our websites are now competing on the same technical level, for lack of better words, it comes back to which website presents it the most efficiently. And would you
Yeah.
say that's kind of what you're seeing?
Yes, if I'm understanding the question, yes. And we don't necessarily want to optimize for SEO anymore. That old model is dead. We want to optimize
Mm,
for the AI search engines. The Google, if you notice now when you go to Google, ads don't come up first
mhm.
anymore. The AI generated responses
Mm.
come up.
Whether you like
So
it or not, because I know so
exactly,
many
exactly.
anti-AI people, you can't even escape it now. Even
Right.
Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook all have forced an AI into it now.
Oh yeah. Oh, I don't know Snapchat because I was banned from Snapchat.
Oh, I just didn't really use it much, and I felt like it was kind of like a high schooler thing. And it's interesting. I saw people in their 20s and 30s and 40s using it, and it's like I don't know. It
Right.
just feels like it's, like how
I
they
know.
say Facebook is for old people and Snapchat's for young people. To
Yeah.
see the cross, it's just weird.
Yeah.
But how do you get
Like,
banned from Snapchat? That might be
well,
an episode
I
on its
was
own.
banned by my son, he is now 28. So at the time he was in high school, and that's how I could message him. And
Oh, okay.
he didn't know this, but it also had the tracking thing on him, so I could see where
Mm.
it was. So he
Ugh.
didn't realize it was turned on, and I did. But every time I try to message him, I just never could. I never cared enough to get the hang of it. I know that I could could message him. And finally, he's like, "Mom, just shut the thing off." You're like, I would message him like 10 times. I was like, and I'm fairly social media savvy. I just could, Snapchat
Right.
just did not
What
work
I'm
with my
hearing
brain.
though is something very vital, which is you're the selfie queen. Is that correct? Did it teach you
No,
how to take really good selfies?
no, it did not.
Okay, you weren't doing the, the snap. You weren't
No, the
doing all
duck
that.
face with the no.
Duck
I
face.
was yeah, yeah.
That I haven't heard
I
that in a long time, actually. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It's
okay.
yeah, thank God that's one of the trends that went away, thank goodness.
Yeah, the yeah, I mean, there was a time where everyone was doing it in every picture, and I hate they do the little bunny ears over your back of your head
Yeah,
as like a photo bomb. I
yeah.
always thought that was so stupid, and I don't know. I hate it. It
And
takes me so many times to get a good looking picture, and then someone ruins it. It's like now I got to go through 20 more photos and 15 minutes of
I know.
posing and
Well,
forcing a
now you
smile.
can AI them and cut it all out. So
I will say the cutout feature is nice, you
yes.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
and it's funny because I've been working on a podcast episode called Trends I Want to Go Away in 2026. And
Mm,
the biggest one that drives me crazy is the puffy microphone to the mouth. And
mm.
I was watching a reel the other day, and she was in a home store, like picking up things to show you, but she had one hand holding the puffy microphone. I'm
Hmm.
like, put the dang microphone down and pick up the vase with two hands.
I
I
don't
was
know
like,
if I've
you're
seen
gonna
that,
drop that. Oh,
and I
it's
don't want to watch it if I do
yeah,
see it.
it's
Yeah.
everywhere. You'll know it when you see it. A lot of them, there
Mm.
people are, I'm not,
Do you like
hopefully it's going away.
ASMR? Do you know about ASMR?
Tell me what it is. No, I'm
That's
not
where they
sure.
have the microphone real close and they tap into it or they eat food real
Oh,
close, like the whisper, like in your
yes.
ear audios. That
No,
they do a lot of microphone close to their mouth for that stuff.
I'm one of those people who
Those
mouth
noises make me
noises.
angry.
Yes.
Get me
And
enraged.
there's a syndrome, there's a name for that.
Yes,
And
it's a
I,
really
yeah,
complicated word like the chiropractor stuff you were talking
yes,
about.
subluxation. Yeah. But there is some, because I always thought it was just weird. But it just drives me crazy when people do that. Or the
Yeah.
tapping on the product, especially when the female people,
Hmm.
the
Oh, with the nails,
videographers
the acrylic
that have the
nails.
big long nails. Yes, quit
Right. They're
tapping.
tapping on a box before they open it.
Yes.
I was scrolling through and some guy and his family were like crunching on chicken wings and other stuff right in the microphone. And it just tell you that's the terrible way to have a business dinner is to sit there and there's
I
someone
know.
next to you just I don't get
Smacking
it.
away.
My dad, the more he would drink, the more he would eat with his mouth open like very loudly and it would
Yes.
drive me crazy, you
Yes.
know. So there's a lot of trends that are just not so good. And
Yeah. Well,
we
and I love the fact that on, some of the reels I'm watching now, and maybe it's just because of the generation that I am, but I'm getting a lot of etiquette. People are coming on and really doing some very strong things around etiquette and how we need to bring
yes.
just basic etiquette back. And I'm like, good. Some of them are a little like, but some
Well,
of them are,
right. I found out there is a special tool to remove the grapes from the vine.
really.
Yes, there's like a little fancy fork to like take them off of the thing, which I never knew,
I
but
never knew that.
I talk a lot about how we've seen the destruction of sit down family dinners.
Yeah.
Like so many
Yeah.
people, and it's so weird because I grew up in a household, we always sat down, the whole
Oh,
family
yeah.
at XYZ time, typically 4 or 5 o'clock, because my dad thought he was 80. And, we would eat super early. And that was that. We had
Yeah.
conversation. And then, when I was dating, I would go over to my girlfriend's house, and their family was like, everyone grabs their own dish and sits in their own room or does their own thing. And
Oh,
it's like,
wow. Yeah.
it was weird. Or we have dinner, half of us are going to have it on the couch, the other half are going to be standing
Yeah.
in the kitchen. And it's like, I don't know. It's just, I personally very value the time of a family all getting together and
Yeah.
sitting down. And I think it also helps prepare you for the adult world. I've actually had
Yeah.
episodes on how the shift in family game night culture has set children up to have poor sportsmanship, like rages and
Yeah.
fits, because they're not learning sportsmanship at home because a lot of families aren't doing game nights or board games or real
Yeah.
games. Maybe they do stuff on the computer. And so then they're going to whatever it is at school they've never lost before, and then they throw a tantrum. So there's
Huh.
some
Yeah.
crazy studies out there, and of course,
Yeah.
participation prizes are a whole conversation on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we had an only child, and I had him late in life. I was almost 40 when I had him. So we were older, and I was laughing with somebody the other day. I said it's probably a good thing because it gave me patience that I probably would not have had, 15 years
Right.
before when all my friends were having kids. But we always, we never treated him like a baby. Like we didn't baby talk to him. If we had dinner, he was expected to sit at the dinner table. He never was allowed to bring Game Boys and the PlayStation
Hmm.
PS2s or whatever to the table. He had to have conversation, and that went around. And he's the only grandchild that lives here, so he was around adults all the time. And it was, I don't know, he was maybe 14 or 15. Of course, he would complain about it because all of his friends got to do it, but we were out to dinner, and there was a table that was next to us, and the adults were on one end, and the other end were like four kids that were about, I don't know, young teenagers, and all of them were on their phones. All of them were not
Right.
one of them was engaging with each other. And he looked over at me, he said, "Okay, I get it now." I'm like, "Yes, score." That's the mom moment that you're like, "Yes, we did something right."
Mm.
but
Well,
but yeah, it's I think it's a huge problem.
yeah, and then it was the opposite of that. So like when I was growing up, like people would come and compliment my parents on how well behaved me and my sisters were at the table because like other little kids would just be running around screaming and I never understood that. And I
Yeah.
guess it's hard for me to see as the kid who was behaved,
Yeah.
but like I never had the people would say maybe because I was, my parents disciplined us, but like I never had the urge to run around.
Right,
And if
right.
I did, I guess there would have been consequences. But I never even felt the urge. I guess I was raised before this, like it's not about even discipline. It was like I was raised like that is wrong. Why would you want to do that? So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
and I've seen that where, people just their children are just do whatever. And I've seen
Yeah.
the opposite end, like you said, where they quiet their children by giving them electronic devices, and then this is real. There are children who cannot go to the bathroom or eat or go in the car without it. And I knew a 2-year-old who needed the tablet on the back of the car seat on, otherwise she would scream the entire car
Yeah.
ride because she had gotten used to it. So it's just so damaging to see stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was like, and we've had whole conversations of that, but I want to get to something that I feel is important that I feel
Yeah.
like I shouldn't have to say, but I do, which is talking about your message, talking about how you present
Mhm.
yourself to your clients. It goes down to also, I've seen podcasts where the guest has no microphone, terrible lighting, missing just the basics. And they're asking and pitching a business program or a coaching program for, let's say, 5 grand a month or $100,000 or $20,000. And it's like, you want me to pay you $5,000 and you're here in a hoodie and you're speaking into your laptop, or the worst is you're on your phone, portrait mode in the corner of a room. And it's like when you pitch and present, like you need to a degree play. In fact, I had a financial expert on the show who said, "Yeah, I drove a beat up car because it was efficient, but I started to lose clients because I'm pulling up in this raggedy car. I had to get a nice looking car because that was trust in me. It was trust, authority building, all that. So
Yeah.
I'd love to talk a little bit about that conversation. And I know, shout out Lady Jen Duplessis is very passionate about how to appear as a good podcast guest. And I used to look at her and Kimberly Spencer, who were putting out these books and programs on how to be a good podcast guest. I said, who would ever need that? And then as a podcast host and watching podcasts, I said, oh, some people actually don't know the bare minimum.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's I think a lot of it goes back to, we were talking about manners and stuff. It goes back to just basic professionalism. And
Mm.
I
We've
think
lost a
that,
lot of it.
yes, I think we have lost a lot of that. And I think part of that, maybe we can blame some of it on COVID and the casualness now that's in the office atmosphere.
Right.
And, for me, I grew up old school, in that now, am I sitting here having this interview, dressed from the top, what is it,
You have pants on,
I
right?
have, I do have pants on, yes,
Okay.
but they
That's
are
good. That's one
fleece,
out of two of
nasty
us, which is
pants.
50% of us know etiquette.
Yeah, it's cold, so I've got on sweats. But I wouldn't dream of coming on without my hair being done or my makeup being done, and and presenting, because I'm representing not only myself but my business.
Hmm.
I don't want somebody to think I'm
Mhm.
unprofessional.
Could be
And
a
as
million
far as
dollar mistake.
exactly, it can. And I see that a lot. I've been there's a woman that I follow that I she's a lovely person and she comes on and no makeup. She like and she wants to get some heavy duty clients. I'm like, honey, if there's no effort put in how you present yourself, what kind of effort are you going to put into my business?
That's
And
exactly, yeah.
yeah, it's old, but I'm hoping that that's coming around a little bit. I hope that people are starting to see that maybe there is some pride in appearance and pride in that professionalism that you have. Because I think that's important. If I have to look at two different people, all things being equal, I'm going to go to the one who's going to show me that they're more of a professional. And
Right.
that's part of it is dress.
100%. And I think that's part of, the messaging you're giving. And it's the idea of like, yes, we're on a podcast, but I also assume that every podcast I go on is going to be video format as well. If
Yeah.
not video format, then maybe social media clips. If neither, what did it cost me to still look good anyway, in
Right.
case that they did use it? And I think
Right.
this idea of, well, the YouTube performance of podcasts is not as drastic as the audio only side, but again, it's like it could be what costs you that high ticket client, all because you didn't want to comb your hair. Now I put on
Right.
a hat, so I don't have to comb my hair. But I think it's Steve Wright and I talked about like show up as you would in real life, as if
Yeah.
it was a real business meeting. And I've actually seen interviews where job interviewers said, "Stand up."
Yeah. Yeah.
There
Oh,
was
yeah.
one. This is unbelievable. The guy was lying down in bed and had like put his laptop on the ceiling, and they said, "Are you laying down?" He said, "No, I'm standing up." And they're like, "Drink water right now." And they tried to test him,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just
Yeah.
like it's so simple. And I
Right.
think
Right.
there's a lot of that, and this goes beyond podcasting to real life too.
Oh, yeah.
Even the
Oh, yeah.
most casual events, it's like I show up, a certain way to even the small gatherings. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter how casual it is, and there's always new people. I think, if let's say it's
Yeah.
Podfest or podcast movement, even if you go every year, like there's not a point where I feel like you can just be like, okay, I'm done. I don't have to
Oh,
do my
sure.
branding anymore. I don't have to do my marketing anymore.
Exactly.
Like your message should always be there. But I think it's just the bare minimum. And I think one of the things is like when someone sees one person doing it and they happen to have success, now it's like, oh, well, that guy showed up to a podcast in a hoodie and he made, XYZ results. So I'm going to do it. And I think it's kind of contagious. I
Yeah.
think it's contagious. When one person slacks off, other people feel justified to do it. And so we see this ripple effect. And it's much harder in the opposite direction of, wow, Lori and Mr. Whiskey were dressed nice. So you know what? We're going to come rocking to the nines as
Right.
well. It takes so much more energy to bring back than it is to take away.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And and I've laughed about this before and I said, when you're as well known as Gary V and you have his influence and you have his business, then you can dress in the holy t-shirt and the ratty jeans. Nobody's going to care.
Right.
But, and that's him. But for most of us, we can't do that. And seeing I've been on some of the business cruises before when people come to the meetings in their bathing suits, especially women with their, cover-ups on, and you can see the
Mhm.
like you're still at a business meeting.
We've
You're
seen some
still,
people barefoot.
yeah.
And I will say, I think
Yes.
flip-flops at least some flip-flops, please. No shoes,
I
no shirt,
totally
no
didn't get that.
service.
Did you
Yeah.
ask them? I totally didn't get why they were
It
doing
was
it
about
barefoot.
freedom and rebellion. So I did it it's
Yeah.
but I want to say making a statement and just being like, "Oh, I don't have to wear shoes, so I'm not going to," are two different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess if you're making a statement and that's your branding, then that's you. But
Yeah.
for me, it's like it's just I find it interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's
Ugh.
a time and place.
Yeah. I just think how many people walk around that and how nasty do your feet get? If you're going to be rebellious, I'm going to be rebellious someplace else. It's not quite so.
Right. Well, it's interesting. You and I were talking before, Mike, about the Jersey Shore, and my
Yeah.
dad, he he's a character for sure. And he has a bad acid reflux and he would spit on the boardwalk all the time. And there was people walking barefoot and he's like he wouldn't make fun of them. He goes, "So I'm spitting on the boardwalk. The seagulls are crapping. There's gum, there's food, there's so much pollution and people are walking barefoot." And I don't know. For me, I follow a rule. On the beach, I'm barefoot, and that's about it.
Yeah. And what, but
And
once I get to the place, I'll
right
barefoot.
on the when
Yeah.
I'm in
Yeah.
the sand, you know.
Yes. Yes. Or people that go barefoot on an airplane and go to the bathroom.
Really,
Oh, nabby.
I
Yes,
have
I've
not
seen
seen
that.
that, and I wouldn't do that.
Ooh.
Even like,
Yeah. I don't even want to take my shoes off on an
well, I was
airplane.
thinking about the water park bathrooms,
Yeah.
or I've seen people go barefoot into the water park bathrooms. They're like, I'm going back in the water. I'm like, yeah, the water I'm swimming in, right?
Yeah.
Put some shoes on,
Yeah.
wash your
It's
feet
like,
off.
I think the simple rule is just think about it, people. There's a place to be rebellious. There's a place to be branded. There's a place to do all that, but just think about what you're doing. And, you know, uh, I know a lot of people don't want to live their life by what other people think, but if you're in a business and you're promoting your business, you do have to think about it at a certain extent because you never know when you're going to meet that next big client. They
Yeah,
could be in the, you know, they could be the person in front of you at the bathroom at the water park. And like you're in there in your nabby old feet. You
yeah.
know?
To get back on track, we mentioned podcasting quite a bit, and I
Yeah.
mentioned that you're also a podcaster. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your podcast and where that kind of fell into
Yeah.
your website designing and marketing.
Yeah. My podcast is called the Midlife Business Academy, and I rebranded it back in September from the Encore Entrepreneur, which is how I started. And I thought about doing a podcast like in 2019. And there was an event put on by a gentleman named Steve Olsher called the New Media Summit or New Media something.
Right.
And it was a really good event, one of the best events. It was full of energy. And that's where I met, in fact, that's where I met the people who run the podcast cruise. Originally, I met Michael there. And I had gone just to learn about podcasting for my clients because I had a couple of clients who were kind of tossing the idea around. And I went down there and I met so many cool people. And I thought, well, this would be kind of interesting to have a podcast. So I started thinking about it. And then, other things got in the way. And a lot
Mm.
of it was just self doubt. And I don't, what am I going to do? And how, process.
Number one thing that stops podcasters and a lot of the what would have been the best artists and authors in the world is just not starting.
Yeah, it's not starting. And so when I finally decided how I wanted to do my format, because I was, you're getting all kinds of opinions and oh my gosh, your head's spinning. And I finally decided my purpose in starting my podcast was to promote, because I knew at some point I wanted to morph into business coaching, was to start talking about my expertise and to show my expertise, which is hard to do from a website design standpoint. It's kind of a hidden skill, a hidden thing that you do unless people talk about it. So that's what I wanted to do. So I decided to invite guests on. And so my format was I would drop 2 episodes a week. I would interview a guest on a Facebook Live because number one, it made me do it. It kept me accountable because it was alive and I announced it. So that was one of the things too, is I'll just put it
Mm.
off for next week. I'll put it off for next week. So my procrastination and imposter syndrome, talking about symptoms of imposter syndrome, kept coming up. So I did that. And then my second episode of the week would be I would talk about whatever and teach or do content around whatever the guest and I talked about. So, for example, my very first episode ever was one of my good friends who's a YouTuber. We came on and talked about using YouTube. So then the episode that came on right after that, episode number two, dropped them both in the same day, was all about how to use YouTube in your business and, strategies around using
Okay.
YouTube. And so I did that for almost 2 years and worked with a gentleman who said, you really, if you're going to use your podcast to promote your business, you really ought to make yourself the expert. And he recommends 75-25, 70% you content, 25% guest.
Right.
And by then I was kind of like, I was meeting people, but you kind of work through everybody that because at that point that was 100 and something episodes. So,
Right.
now I could go back and fill up another year with guests. But at that point I was kind of, so I'm like, I'm ready to do just solo. So I did solo for a while and then just really felt led to change that name from the Encore Entrepreneur into something that was more SEO found because I'd been putting all this work into it and doing all of this, but I wasn't getting downloads. I wasn't getting a lot of people listening to it because I couldn't find it. Encore Entrepreneur is not something somebody was searching for on Apple
Yeah.
Podcasts.
You're saying encore like a
Encore,
second
like
performance of a show.
yes,
So
second
what?
act. You're coming back for the encore.
Right.
Yes,
What? And that was
yes,
supposed to represent like the midlife bounce back.
yes. The midlife
Okay.
bounce back. You're coming back for your
Right.
second act. It catchy. There's again that
It makes
language
sense
that
after you
nobody.
explain it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like
But you
now I'm
don't want
like,
to
wow,
have to
that's
explain it.
genius.
Yeah, you
Right.
don't want to have to explain it.
Right.
Um, and I remember having a conversation with my business coach years before where I said, if you look around, this is a market that is not served. Look around this room. At the time, we had 150 people in this program, and probably over half of them were gray hair, no hair, bald. So there's a huge market out there of people in their 50s and up that are still working. The fastest growing market of entrepreneurs are Gen X's, those that are
Wow.
1980 or 1965 to 1980 birth. And, nobody's servicing, or they're servicing as they're teaching them like they're 30.
Hmm.
So that's how the whole thing kind of came about. So then I decided in September, I worked toward rebranding it to the Midlife Business Academy because I talk primarily to midlife business owners. It doesn't mean that if you listen to an episode, you wouldn't get something out of it, but my marketing is for, and that's who I do it for. I keep things simple. I uncomplicate things and I'm talking a lot around the the what's behind your business and I'm trying really hard not to say the word mindset. but
That
but
is that one of the
that's
overused
one of those
words?
words.
I
Yeah,
think
that's
that
one of
is
those
an
words.
overused word.
But it's
Yeah.
one of the but what's behind the business? What are you really wanting to accomplish? And are you wanting to do it in that hustle culture mentality, or are you just wanting to do it as a 3 day a week business, which is perfectly fine? Because a lot of business owners at that point, they've either retiring or they've been riffed or they can't get another job. We talked about that a little bit earlier, that they just can't find jobs at their age bracket.
Right.
And so they go to the business because that's all that they've got to. So that's a different mindset than somebody that is retired and living off of a pension from their business, or have a good a good retirement account, and they just want some supplemental money. So so I rebranded it and wanted to do something that was very, here we go, the SEO friendly, because people are searching for midlife business. People are searching for, those terms that are related to that midlife business owner. How to grow my midlife business, how to be a midlife business owner. And that's where I come up now. And
Mm.
I talk to coaches and consultants primarily, and so my title is the Midlife Business Academy, and then I have a subtitle that goes with it that really talks to who it is, and that's searchable. And I can't tell you what it is because I change it all the time. I tweak it, and I can't even tell you what it is right now because I've just tweaked it. But it's,
Right.
something along the lines of business tips and strategies for coaches, for midlife age coaches and consultants, or something like that. And somewhere in there, I've got entrepreneur because that's also a term that's searched. So that's kind of where the podcast has come. And I'm recording this week. I'm recording episode 321. So
Wow.
yeah,
And that rebrand was this past September or the year
this
before?
past September. Yeah.
Okay, because when you said your first name, I was like, that sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah.
I think you really lucked out. One of the things that I think is a concern for a lot of new podcasters, especially, is the competitiveness and the overlap of names. I know the lovely Diana Devi, she does the An Ageless Life, right? And we're
Yes.
talking about that market, like midlife reset or ageless after 50, living after 50, bold, big, bold, beautiful life after 50. Like you look at the issue is the competitiveness now of names. Now I
Yeah.
lucked out. No one wanted a couple of
Right.
nukes, but it's funny. I've been thinking of changing that name, maybe. Ooh, but
Add a subtitle. Add a subtitle.
right. Well,
Because that's
that's
what
what
we
I
did.
did.
Yeah,
I
because that's
added
what we did with Diana. Diana is a client, and we added a subtitle, the midlife reset, colon, here's who it's for. So
I'm
yeah, so
her
added a
client because
subtitle.
I'm
Yeah.
learning dance. That's one of
Oh, are
my
you?
goals of
Oh, nice.
2026 is to learn salsa and tango and the
Yeah.
worm. I don't, were you
Yeah.
there when I did the worm?
Uh-uh.
Oh, okay.
Uh-uh.
Yeah.
No, no, we laugh because I'm the early bird. So she's out dancing on the cruise and I'm like in bed lights out at 10 o'clock.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because I would ask her, I was like, where's your other half? And she's like,
Yeah.
sleeping. I'm like,
Sleeping. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, we were out at the dance club and I attempted to do the worm and
Oh, funny.
Diana being a dance instructor had well her feedback was just a giggle and a
Yeah.
look away. So I think I need some practice
Yeah.
on that. But yeah, I just say that because I added a subtitle to my show as well because it was a couple of
Yeah.
nukes and then I added rebuilding our lives or rebranding our lives, rebuilding our dreams. Don't even know
Yep.
my own subtitle.
I
Rebranding
would
our
even
lives.
expand that further and say exactly what it is. It's
Yeah.
building our dreams through blah blah, so that at a
Yeah.
benefit, so it makes it even a little more clear. But I do
Yeah,
like,
and I was just talking to her about it today about, like I like Couple of Nukes. It has a
yeah,
very established presence online. It is about the origins of where the show started, and it really
yeah,
emphasizes that how I needed to rebrand and rebuild because no one, the other nuclear operators aren't on board. It was supposed to be a Couple of Nukes, which
yeah,
is a shorthand for nuclear operators in the
yeah,
Navy. And that didn't happen. And I've looked at like I've been doing this for 3 years. I have such an established presence online, been on over 30
yeah.
shows. If I rebrand, now all those shows have wrong information. I'm gonna have to rebrand in parentheses, put formerly Couple of Nukes for everyone who
Yeah,
finds my old episodes, my old guest appearances
yeah.
and all that stuff.
Well,
It's
you can actually do it and leave it on the same feed. Like
I thought
we
about
are
that too.
slowly going back because I kept my podcast tile very similar. So
Oh,
from a
okay.
branding standpoint, it looks, it's the same image, same color. We just changed the title and changed a couple of things around. So if you go back and look, we're slowly changing over, but I didn't go back and change all my old episodes. I left them because it's
Okay.
still and occasionally I will say formerly the Encore Entrepreneur, but I'm getting far enough out from it that I don't have to keep doing that.
Right. Well, I
But
think
yeah,
this is an important conversation because I think there's a lot of people trying to pivot, rebrand, or, change their business at this
right.
point in their life. And I think that's one of the difficult things. Like I didn't get into podcasting to be a business owner. I got into it
Yeah.
by, it kind of just happened. It's like, where did I go from here? And I think
Yeah.
a lot of business owners, they just had an idea or a small vision, and now it's become something so big, especially when they're in their midlife. They're like, wow, this is going to be the time and finances are going to be a lot more than I thought. And, so I think it's really important
Yeah.
to have these conversations about rebranding and pivoting
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and changing your message as part of that.
Yeah. And it's, just like anything else, we can make it really complicated or we can keep it simple. Because if you
Right.
make it complicated, you're going to postpone it and not do it. But if you keep it simple, it makes it doable and you do it in steps. I would love to say that people notice right away that I changed it, but in all honesty, no, not really. I mean, it
I
took
thought it
a
was
while.
always the midlife.
Yeah.
I totally
Yeah.
forgot about the other
Yeah.
name. So
Yeah, if
you
you go
fooled
back and
me.
look in the old directories, it's the old one, but they look very similar. So, I didn't change a whole lot. I totally changed the website, I have a little up on that one, so I've, got a whole new website and that's, the bulk of my business now is the Midlife Business Academy.
Mhm.
The podcast is part of it, but the programs and everything are all running through Midlife Business Academy. So you can get your MBA.
Right. And what I want to clarify too for anyone who is not tracking entirely, who should really reach out to you to work with you?
Business owners that are typically in their midlife, and notice I said business owners, I didn't say female business owners because I work with men also, that are struggling with how to fit their business into their life, or they want to do a business but they don't know how it's going to fit into their life because a lot of my clients, their partners are retiring or they're about to or they've retired, and they're not sure how to get started. There's so much information out there on how to start a business, and they overcomplicate it and make it so hard. Starting a business is really not hard. The first thing you want to do when you start a business is start telling people Decide what, well, first of all, you want to decide what you want to do. Where do you want to start? And it's going to change. It's going to morph. It's going to gradually change into something as you
100%.
solidify that proof of concept. But then you start going out and you start meeting people and you start telling them what you're doing, get feedback. I just say eyes to eyes, nose to nose, toes to toes. You don't need a website. You don't need a business card. You don't need all of that. Just go out and start talking to people. Find people that you think would be who you want to work with and say, I've got an idea. I want to get your thoughts and feedback on it. And it can start as simply as that. That will help you fine tune and mold where that's going to go. And it could take you a couple weeks, it could take you a couple months, it could take you a year, depending on what you're doing. But if you're getting honest, good feedback from people that you perceive to be your ideal client, air quotes again, then that's going to give you good information, and you can solidify because it's going to change. That's
Mhm.
why even though I own a website design company, I say don't even think about it for a while. You don't need it yet. You will. All you want is just a one pager that's going to say, this is who I am, a picture of you, a quick little bio about who you are, and a contact form. That's all you need for right now. Get it up there. And it does a couple of things. It authenticates you because now you've got a presence in a very small way. But you can also start building what they call authority on your domain. So if your domain is a couple of nukes and you're just starting your business, you go ahead and get that domain because longevity is good for Google. You want to make sure that
Yes.
it's not a brand new domain. And they treat it differently when you've had it a while. So go ahead and let it start building all that authority for you. And you can also set up a Google My Business, which is, it's been around a long time, but Google My Business still works for businesses. Somebody's
Hmm.
trying to search for you. They met you at a networking or something. But that's what I would tell you. You don't even need a business card. Just get your little QR code or make a contact on your form that you can share with somebody that's got all your information on it. That's all you need.
And nowadays you can get a smart ring and just, kind of punch people with your business, see those. But you can, when you visit your friend's home, type your podcast into their smart fridge, start playing
Right.
it in the background. But I
Yeah.
think I can really relate to what you're saying in the sense that when I first came to Podfest the first year that I went, I was brand new to podcasting. I never, shared the show with anyone. And from the beginning of that event to the end, the condensing and perfecting of my message was occurring in real time. Same with
Right.
every show that I've been on. Like I look at the first podcast I was ever on, I try not to listen to it. And the latest ones, the way I share my message, the fluidity of it, the clearness of it, the efficiency of it, all of it has drastically improved from real-time experience. So I think, continually pitching and practicing and
Right.
getting feedback from real people. And you can pitch to AI over and over again, but it's
Yeah.
people who are going to be receiving the message and you need to know how they're going to receive it.
Right.
And I think it's especially important if you have a very diverse range of people that you're marketing to, that you try to get a diverse range of feedback. But, I
Yes.
have lived through it and just going through it, and that's how you really practice. And that includes even Zoom events. Like try to go to as many online little networking groups you can to practice pitching it and,
Right.
condensing it down and perfecting it.
Right. And along those same lines, I'd say, get on as many summits as you can. Summits and podcast interviews are a great way to hone your message and morph it and figure out where you want to go, especially summits if they're an interview style. Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to know your subject matter. What you may not know is how to market your business or how to make it into a business. But if you're talking subject matter, you're going to come across as the expert anyway. So if you go on to podcasts or go on to some of the summits, that is a really good way to get your name out there and to start validating that message. Like you said, the more people you talk to, the more it's going to become cohesive and make sense. And weed some things out. You'll know what gets traction. You'll know what won't, or what people will look at you with their eyes glazed and like, I totally didn't get what you just said. And you can see that. So there's a lot of good ways that you can get your name out there and start working on it.
Right. And I don't want to overcomplicate things, but I know one thing I've noticed too is like I have many titles, right? Speaker, preacher, author, comedian, dog dad, podcaster. the arrangement of those plays a vital role too. I've noticed like what words I put at the end or the beginning can change how people react or take me.
Right.
So again, I don't want to put forward overanalyze everything you do, but there are a lot of small details to consider as well. So like
Yeah.
as you're perfecting your title or titles, think about that as well,
Right.
so
Yeah. And I generally counsel my clients to put the money making stuff first, the passion stuff middle,
that's
and
why I
the
start with
hobby and the
good
thing.
looking. I
Yes.
say I'm a good looking,
Yeah.
that's
But
what I start with.
dog lover,
Yeah.
that is who you are. So put that kind of toward
Mm.
the end because
Got
that's
my I
that
got my dog
can,
right here this whole
oh
time.
look.
Look at
Yeah.
that.
Oh, what a I couldn't put my cat up. She would be like all over the place.
She knocked the microphone over,
Oh yeah.
probably.
Yeah. Yeah. Or by water.
Mm.
But yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's some different ways to do it, but yeah, I mean, that's part of who you are and your brand. And, people want to work with people they like and that know, like, and trust thing. Although I flip it and I say like, know, and trust. Because if I don't like you, I don't want to get to know you. So I flip it a little bit.
That, let me, without being too specific, I will say I've gone to business events and have encountered certain individuals multiple times throughout the event. They never say a word to me. We've made eye contact. I've even spoken to their business partners or girlfriends or boyfriends. And then a few weeks later, I get an email. Oh, would you want to come to my event for XYZ amount of money or do this? And it's like, you had multiple chances to talk to me in person and didn't. And like for me, that's right there. I consider that the liking part, right?
Yep.
I
I know exactly who you're talking about too.
I was, oh man, is it that obvious?
Oh,
Okay. Well,
exactly.
yeah, so it's interesting when you
Yeah.
write how you treat people, that likability is
Yeah.
important because I mean, I talk about that with podcasting and business is conscious consumerism,
Right.
especially from my generation and generations below and above me. They care more about who the person is and their morals and values than the product itself. And people rather go to a more expensive company that is organic or treats their employees right, for basic examples, than a company that is cheaper and uses
Yeah.
unethical means. And it's the same thing with your business. Me and someone else could have the same exact products for two different drastic prices, but if you like me better because I'm good looking, you might want to go with that compared to someone else. But again, I think that likability is so important. I think that is part of what builds trust too.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, you can trust someone to get it done because they're a professional, but if you can't get along with them or work with them, ultimately that relationship is just not going to work well.
Yeah, it
So,
was funny on our first my first cruise, there was a gentleman on there who I I really didn't care for. And he was very similar to the person you named.
I
And
did not name.
I oh
It
yeah,
was who was implied, I
yeah,
guess.
who was implied it was that mental
Mm,
telepathy name because that's
right,
exactly who it
right.
is. Very similar person. And sent me an invitation right after the first of the year or right around the holidays for to be on his summit. And I thought, I wasn't going to do it. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it because I wanted to see if my first impression was correct.
Mm,
And it was, you had a choice of interview or presentation. I always choose interview because I like the interchange and, you think of questions and stuff. So I
right.
always choose interview. And I didn't know how long we had. I didn't know anything about it other than this was my time and this was what I was talking about. So we get on and he chit chats for a minute and all of a sudden he says, well, I'll see you later. And screen's all yours. No introduction. No, I mean, he just left me. Thank
Wow.
goodness. I had talking points up because there was a couple things I wanted to talk about. And it was the same presentation I ended up doing on the podcast cruise, a new media cruise. But I'm like, thank goodness I had that kind of in front of me or the slides or whatever, because I had
Mm.
something to go by. But it was just like, blah, blah. And so when it was over, it was like, well, I'll never do that again. So,
Yeah. I know
first
we're supposed
impression.
to be like, oh, maybe it's just a wrong first impression, but a lot of times your instincts and your
Yeah.
your feelings or your intuition is pretty
Yeah.
accurate on that
Yeah.
stuff. And
I have been wrong one time, big time. And you've heard the story. It's when I met one of the hosts of the New Media Cruise. I met
Mm.
him at New Media
Oh yeah,
Summit,
yeah. I think I have
and
heard it.
I thought he was arrogant. I thought I won't tell you the name that I called him, but it ends
Mm.
with, it rhymes with bass. And I just thought, oh, and so the first marketing cruise I went on, I was talking to my friend who had also met him and had kind of had the same feeling. And I'm like, oh, he's on the cruise. We're like, oh, great, cool. So we're sitting at dinner, and he and his date come walking down, and they're getting closer to our table. I'm like, keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. And he
Yeah.
ends up sitting at our table directly across from us. Lovely. We had the best conversation. She was delightful. They're getting married in 2 weeks, so she wasn't just some babe date. She was they were in
Oh,
a
you're gonna say
relationship.
bimbo.
No, 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 I wouldn't say that. But it was like totally wrong. And I told him, I said, my first impression was so bad. I'm really, really glad we had that opportunity to talk, because then I got into his world. I, became part of the New Media Cruise. And I've shared this story very publicly. In fact, he was a guest on my
Yeah.
podcast,
I
and
was
he
gonna
said,
say, I
"Are you going to
remember
tell the
hearing
story?"
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said, "Are you going to tell the story of how we met?" And I'm like, "Sure, if you're okay with it."
Yeah.
But it was very much of the wrong first impression. And when there again, kind of goes back to what we talked about, is what is the first impression you're giving? Because I had had that first impression of him for years and was not looking forward to meeting him, didn't want to sit at his table because that first impression was so bad. And he said, I'm very introverted. We actually like were on an elevator together, and he said, I wouldn't have talked to you on an elevator because I don't want to talk to anybody. He said, I've changed. Really had to work out of that
Mm.
now. But back then, there was a very, I'd only been in business for a while. I was not very confident about things. Totally different. You never know what somebody's backstory is and how it's coming across. So yeah, so now we're very, very good friends, and totally adore them and love them, and think the
Yeah.
world. So yeah.
Yeah. But I think after, you give them that second chance and they prove you right twice in a row, that's it.
Yes.
I mean, if you want to do the three strikes you're out, by all means,
Yes.
but when it comes to your business, especially collaborations and reputation and finances, you got to be careful about that.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, it's kind of like going to a restaurant. I'll give a
mm,
restaurant twice. If they're horrible
mhm.
the
I
first
listen
time,
to
I
every
will give
song
it one.
twice. Same
Yes,
thing with music.
exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing. I'll give you the benefit of the
Mm.
doubt, but yeah, no,
And
not
and
gonna
same
happen.
with TV shows because I have a bad habit of being like, oh, this first episode is so slow or boring, and then I dropped off. And then some of my favorite shows, it's like, look, you got to
Oh
get
yeah.
past the first episode. You got to,
Oh
and
yeah.
I think that's just become part of culture. So quick to judge, and like a lot of people are like, first date done. That's it. Like
Yeah.
not really getting to know a person. And I think what you mentioned though is one of my pet peeves, which is I had a gentleman I was friends with, no longer, he's an enemy, but we were friends at the time. Everywhere we went, that it was his friend group or some group that he was a part of, never introduced me.
Oh
Yeah, he just has me standing there like a jerk. And I feel like it is rude for me to be like, hey, I'm so and so, blah, blah. And especially if they're already conversating,
yes.
So
Yes.
I hate that. And I think on that professional level too, it's like you got to give some kind of introduction,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that would have, I
Yeah.
would have been steaming mad too, because I just feel like it's rude to introduce yourself,
Yeah.
like
Well,
especially if you're a
yeah.
guest,
Yeah, and I
so
did write him an email afterwards and say, I don't know if I talked too
on
long
a
or
scale of
talked
one to
too short,
10,
or
this
yeah,
is how
yeah,
I
scale
rated
of
the
one to
event.
two. Yeah. Yeah. An introduction would have been nice. Some kind of edification. Usually you get something, or at least a
Right.
name, but yeah, so it was interesting. But hey, we'll
Yeah.
we'll
And I
see.
just want to go back to website design. Speaking of
Yeah.
websites, ignitingyourbusiness.com. I got to plug that. It'll be in the description below.
Yeah.
That's where people can find you. They can find your podcast, a little bit about you, and obviously what you can do for them. obviously your messaging on there is perfect because that's what you do. And so, I appreciate that. And I just want to share that for everyone. And I feel like we've shared a lot, but if you wanted
Yeah,
to give one last message, since you're a messaging expert, what would that be? It doesn't have to be specifically about messaging or marketing or business, but
yeah.
just overall, based on all we've talked about.
I would just say overall, don't hesitate to start the things that you want to start.
Hmm. Hmm.
Don't let fear hold you back because we all start somewhere. And don't look at what else somebody has been doing that's been building for 20 years if you're just starting. Start where you are, start with what you need, and move from there. Because owning your own business or doing what we're doing is the most gratifying and freeing thing in the world. And just make it your own and start.
I chuckle when you say freeing. I used to work a 9 to 5. Now I work 24/7. But
I know,
yeah,
right?
right.
But it's
No,
your 20. You can work which 24/7s you want?
right. I work all
Yeah,
24/7,
I know.
But I get what you're saying. No, I'm very blessed to have the flexibility that we have like we do. And I think, like you said, I mentioned it earlier, so many people I know have pitched to me these book ideas they have in their heads or these art pieces or these podcast ideas. And years go by where they still haven't started and
Yeah,
they're caught up on perfectionism and fear. And I'm like, Chris Krimitsos said, I believe it was, he made the book Start Ugly, where
yeah,
you just got to start and
yeah,
figure it out along the way. Or I feel like now more than ever, there is so much information on how to start
yeah,
more than there ever has been
yeah,
between AI, podcasts,
yeah.
books, courses, groups for
Right,
free and paid. I think now is the best time to start. And I think it's only going to get more and more competitive. So the
right.
longer you wait, the more difficult it's going to be. So start
Yeah.
right now. Ignite your business today.
There you go. Yeah, and there's a lot yeah, you're right. There's a lot of stuff on starting a business, and you can read all about starting your business, but you still have to start. It still all comes down to you
Don't
starting.
outsource it. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't outsource it.
All
Not
right.
yet, anyway.
Well, Ms. Lyons, so great to catch up with you. A
You
great time. A
too.
lot more laughs than I thought. So
And it's
that's good.
Lori.
Oh, okay. I was like, did I say your name wrong? I'm
No,
tracking.
no, we've had this conversation
Lord.
before, so I have to laugh.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
thank
this
you
is
so
my
much,
my
and
mother-in-law.
we'll be catching up soon again.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.